Hi there, and welcome to the Play Therapy Circle. Before we begin, please note this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It does not provide therapeutic advice, and listening does not create a client therapist relationship. All views expressed are my own, and any case examples shared have been de identified to protect privacy. If you're seeking personal support, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional in your area. Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Play Therapy Circle. I'm Kylie Ellison, a therapist, clinical supervisor, and play therapy trainer, and I'm so grateful you're here. This podcast is a space for thoughtful, soulful conversations about child-centered therapy, play-based work, and what it means to show up with presence and compassion, both for our clients and for ourselves. Whether you're a seasoned play therapist, a student just starting out, or someone deeply passionate about working with children, you belong here. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Play Therapy Circle podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ellison, and I am so glad you are here. Hey everyone. Happy Wednesday night, you guys. I always feel like when I start these episodes, I take a second to remember what day of the week it is because I'm here and I'm recording. And I'm not going to lie to you guys because I never do. I'm fully authentic in this space, as you guys know. It is 9 o'clock at night. It's 9 o'clock at night. And just for funsies, I've decided to do a topic on the nervous system in the playroom, which is very content heavy. So this is going to be a fun ride, you guys. This is going to be a journey. Welcome back to all of our listeners and to anyone new listening. Hello, welcome to the circle. How's your week been, guys? Truly, how are y'all doing? Like truly. This week has been a week, you guys, and I feel like I say that every week, and I'm probably going to keep you guys on your toes that like one day I might actually be like, oh my God, it's been amazing this week. Excuse me, I had to sneeze it. But no, not this week. Excuse me. It is April Fool's Day here in Australia when I'm recording this at 9 o'clock on the 1st of April. So tomorrow is my daughter's birthday, and then it's the weekend and it's Easter. So for any of you guys listening around the world, if you are celebrating Easter this weekend, I hope you have a wonderful, connected and safe and healthy weekend. We are definitely having some downtime and recharging because yeah. And I was only just saying to the team today, I was like, it's only April, but like, wow, so many things have happened already this year. So we're all having a break in our team next week, which is really nice. But I have listened to our listeners and what you guys love. And I'm so grateful to everyone listening. We're now in 55 countries, you guys. So you are part of an international circle community at this stage. Like it's wild and it's amazing and it's so great. So I'm very mindful that I want to connect not only in Australia, because that's obviously where I am. I'm in Brisbane, in Queensland, in Australia, but I want to connect with all of you listening around the world. And I have noticed, certainly from our listener stats, that you guys are loving the last couple of episodes, which is amazing. I'm so glad that it's kind of reaching people and you're finding it useful. So I want to build on that and make sure that my content is helpful for you guys. You know that I had sort of a plan at the start of this year for my content, and then I changed because that's how I roll. And so this week, I want to do and talk about the nervous system in the playroom, because I think that this is something that will resonate for beginning play therapists and seasoned play therapists, as well as parents and caregivers listening as well. So I'm really excited to dive into this. I'm not going to lie, it is 9 o'clock at night though. So if I make this through, it'll be such a big win. Okay, so bear with me because I also want to make sure that I get this information right. So I do have lots of notes to keep me busy and keep me on track, because that's what I need at this point in the week. So how do I want to start this conversation with you guys? Because you know that I absolutely love this podcast being about sharing information and connecting and authenticity and having a yarn. So how I want to start, and I want to make sure that this isn't too content heavy because it definitely is something that you can read so much more about. This episode is really intended, as always, to just begin the conversation and to begin those reflections. I definitely highly recommend you diving into textbooks and research in this space if you want to know a lot more. This is just going to be a taster, you guys. Just getting you thinking about, because this is all about practice, right? And connecting with those that are passionate about child-centered play therapy, because that's what our circle is all about. And also sharing this information far and wide, including internationally at this point. So I want to make sure that it's reaching as many people as we can with this topic. So this is definitely an overview, and I encourage you to dive in further to the research if you're interested. So we really, to just kind of keep it at the basics for tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the different stages of the nervous system, the different states, sorry. So I want to talk about 3 different states that the nervous system always lives in. And so I want to make sure that this is digestible. So hopefully it will make sense. We're going to hold hands and get through this together, you guys. But there is 3 different states that we know that occurs in the nervous system. And basically, what we are doing and what state we're in essentially determines how we learn, how we feel, how we connect with others, and how we do. So state 1 is known as the safe and social state. So this is our optimal state. This is what we want to be operating in. You guys, right now, I am so tired. So I'm pretty sure I'm not maybe in my optimal state. But I want you to have a think about in your daily life, just in maybe your day to day, where have you felt that you have felt safe and social and regulated? Because that's what we call that safe and social state, right? So children can learn and play and engage and connect when they're in that safe and social state, also known as the ventral vagal. I want to get that right. I want to make sure I say that right. So what do we look for in the playroom to know that that is potentially where a child is presenting with when they commence their session? So we're looking at eye contact, open body language, playfulness, responsiveness, able to shift, able to focus. So we are obviously always aiming to do that, but that's not necessarily always the case for the kids that we connect with in the playroom. So what is the second state that we know about the nervous system? We can be in fight or flight. So this is our sympathetic activation. So the system detects a threat and, whether it's real or perceived, and mobilizes for action essentially. So our heart rate goes up, our muscles are activated, rational thinking goes offline. This is really important. If we are noticing a child who presents with aggression, defiance, arguing, running away, explosive behavior, crying, this is a child in fight or flight, potentially, most likely. They're certainly potentially, if they are in that space of aggression, dysregulation, they're not in that safe and social and optimal space. They're most likely in that fight or flight. So to give you guys, I guess, that insight, we're noticing for that child that they're not choosing to be difficult, their nervous system has taken over. They're in fight or flight. They are in that survival mode and they are using their primal means to do so with that aggression, running away. That's kind of what we see in terms of some of those behaviors. There's so many there. That's just a beginning list. So that is the second state. The third state is that freeze or shutdown, also known as the dorsal vagal. So when fight or flight isn't possible or doesn't work for the child, the system then starts to shut down. So again, we're noticing that this is not a cognitive decision of a child. They're not making this decision and making an intention to behave in this way. This is the brain and the body taking over. So that can look like disassociation, withdrawal, going blank, becoming very still, or very compliant. So in children, what this looks like is a quiet child who never wants to cause any problems or kind of raise any attention or draw any attention to themselves, that they tend to zone out or look like they've checked out or they're not listening, or just say, I don't know to everything. So this is often, I have found in my career in working with children, not only in the playroom, but in the child protection space, I think this is something that is often missed. And so when I'm noticing it in the playroom, I'm certainly having those conversations with parents parents and caregivers to say, hey, this is something I've started to notice in the playroom. I think it's something to keep an eye on at home as well, and to whether further intervention and support is needed, because it is certainly a coping mechanism of the brain when the brain becomes so overwhelmed, essentially, and goes into kind of that shutdown mode. So we really want to support the child so that the brain doesn't feel like it needs to go into that place in order to cope. So it's actually, I always say, something that I say often to parents is the children that are aggressive, that kind of lash out, are having tantrums, meltdowns at home, very defiant, they're actually the kids, although that behavior is certainly not ideal, they're certainly expressing their emotions. They're also trying to communicate to us that dysregulation, right? And that nervous system taking over. That's actually, I see in some respects, it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's an indicator that we can really kind of tap into and help respond to. The presentation where kids withdraw, when they become disassociative, they're actually the more concerning ones for me, because they often tend to, say in the school setting, go and fly under the radar because they're not that explosive behaviors. They're not drawing attention in the classroom. They're actually retreating and withdrawing, but seemingly potentially behaving as compliant. So we're absolutely educating ourselves, I guess, on some of these behaviors to become curious about that if we see it in the playroom. So we are talking here and kind of summarizing here, obviously, those 3 different states. And we essentially want to, I guess, reflect on that idea that you can't reason with a child in state 2 or state 3. So if they're in fight or flight, or they're freeze or shut down, you can't communicate with them verbally. You can't reason with them. You can't teach them. You can't reach them or connect with them, not until their nervous system comes back online and comes back into that safe and social space. So how do we do that? It's regulation. It comes first always. So let's talk a little bit about it a little bit more and kind of connect it with the playroom, I guess, because what we're talking about here is polyvagal theory. So many of you have no doubt come across this theory in your studies or in professional development that you've done. So I'm not going to go into too much of the download because there's so much there, right, in terms of the theory and the research. But what I want to, I guess, simplify it for the purposes of this podcast tonight is just to talk about the theory and what it relates to. So it's this idea of the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body and is connected from the brainstem to the gut. Literally, like, side note, because I get distracted in this podcast, right? I went to tried a new chiropractor today. Like, here you go, guys. Like, information you didn't ask for. And they were talking about, I found the most amazing chiropractor, so I'm so happy with her. But she was talking all about the brain, all about the vagus nerve, all about that fight or flight response and how it can impact in terms of your posture and your physical composition, and how the body will communicate through pain that the body is in distress and that it actually needs to move away from a threat. It's in that fight or flight, it's perceiving a threat, and it's seeking for the person to move themselves away from that to be able to come back to that optimal regulation state. Wild for me, because I've never had a chiropractor explain it to me like that. I was like, she is amazing. But it makes total sense. It makes so much sense. And so what we understand about that vagus nerve is that it is kind of like that primary highway of the nervous system, the automatic nervous system. So that system that we're talking about, this vagus nerve, regulates our physiological state without conscious thought. So this is happening at an unconscious level. I've spoken a lot about that in terms of play therapy and how we know that in the playroom, children are playing out often unconsciously their experiences in their formative years. And so this is now starting to pull this all together to give us even more evidence and support for the work that we do in child-centered play therapy in the playroom. So this particular theory explains those 3 states as well, and crucially how we move in between them. So I want to talk about the concept of neuroception, which again, you guys, I'm sure have heard before, but for anyone who hasn't heard about it before, it's this idea of how the nervous system, so that automatic nervous system I was just talking about, how it's constantly scanning for safety or threat below the conscious awareness. So it's constantly happening without us even being aware of it. So a child doesn't decide to go into fight or flight. Their nervous system detects a signal or potentially a threat and responds automatically. So what can those, signals look like? A change in tone, a facial expression, a change in body posture, something shifting in the environment. It doesn't have to be anything significant because the body is constantly scanning regardless. And so when it picks up on that signal of a potential threat, it responds automatically. It's not that it sends a signal to the cognitive part of the child's brain to say, okay, this is happening, you need to respond to it like this. It's all happening unconsciously and automatically. So this is why logical explanations don't help a dysregulated child. This is really important, and especially for those of you working, say, in the education space, where I know this can be really challenging, but also for parents who are absolutely doing their best at the moment. Like when I acknowledge the collective community internationally that we are living in right now, we are all dysregulated to some extent. It's a lot. It's a lot. So give yourself that grace as a parent if you're listening tonight and you're feeling like, oh my God, I'm dysregulating my child. No. It's more that we are certainly wired in terms of our survival to notice those threats and move away from them. So children cannot be reasoned with when they become dysregulated, when they unconsciously register that threat and respond automatically. So the part of the brain that is responsible for logical thinking is offline. It's offline. It's not working. So this is why the way we are with children matters as much as what we do, because it's not about the talking. And we as child centered play therapists know that already, right? We know that connection, that co-regulation, all of that brain science that we talked about a couple of episodes ago is so much at the core of what we do in child-centered play therapy. And it's so wonderful that we've obviously had this framework for practice and this modality since the 40s, but we have all of this incredibly rich research to align with everything that we do, which is amazing. It helps support us empirically and gives us that evidence base. So what are we talking about here when we are talking about this concept of these different states of the nervous system, how the child has this neuroception, this theory or concept of neuroception, where they are constantly scanning their environment and looking for those threats. What does the nervous system need? It needs co-regulation. And not just for children. I work with children of all ages. All of us right now need that sense of co-regulation to support our emotional well-being. So the nervous system is a social organ. It is designed to be regulated by another nervous system. Let me say that again. The nervous system is a social organ. So it is designed to be regulated by another nervous system. So kids need us. And we know that, especially for us as parents. We know that incredible connection and pull we have to our children, especially when they're in distress. But this is now some of the science coming in as well, right? So a regulated adult is the most powerful regulation tool available to a child. If we're regulated as a parent or as a play therapist, it's going to have a significantly positive impact on the child if they are feeling that sense of dysregulation. This is not a metaphor, it's neurobiology. So this kind of helps when we start to kind of back the science behind what we do in the playroom, right? A calm, warm, attuned adult literally helps a child's nervous system to return to that social and safe state one. This is the neurological argument for why the therapist's own regulation is not optional, it's a mechanism for change. So we always talk about, right, that being aware of our own triggers, getting our own personal therapy, making sure that we are able to be present, congruent, empathetic, all of those things we talk about when we learn child-centered play therapy and when we start to practice in this way. But this is another reason why it's so important, not just for our own mental health and for our own well-being, but it actually is a tool for us to affect change in a child. We can actually, in real time, make a significant difference if we are able to regulate ourselves. So all jokes aside, with obviously how the world is right now and how I started this conversation, we are having a break next week because we need to recharge as play therapists. And so we are certainly valuing that at our practice, that having those breaks, having those times to be able to connect with family, connect with nature, just de-stress is an essential part of practice. It's an ethical part of practice that we are making sure that we're looking after ourselves, and so that we can show up as our most regulated self in the playroom. So that kind of idea of parking kind of our grocery list and our to-do list and, the mountain of, paperwork we've got to do so that we can be present with a child is so much about that co-regulation experience for the child that is going to have a significant impact on their work. So how do we map this with CCPT specifically? So the consistent environment signals safety to that child's neuroception. So they're constantly looking for that threat or safety. And so when they are able to consistently have that experience in the playroom, we're able to help them to stay in that state one of safe and social so that they are in that optimal space to play and learn. The therapist's warm, non-anxious presence helps co-regulate the child's nervous system, which is just so fundamental. We know Maslow's hierarchy of need. I'm always kind of connecting with this as well when I'm talking to supervisees, because taking care of children's basic needs first then means they can learn. So if they don't have that emotional state in the beginning of that regulated presence, they're not going to be able to take in any information. And so we know that at the moment, especially for our preppy kids, so I'm saying prep because I'm in Queensland, but that first year of school, for so many kids starting the school year, so dysregulated, you guys. So dysregulated. So then we try and put learning on top of that, and we're seeing this giant influx in kids lasting till about lunchtime, and then they're needing to go home because they're so in that fight or flight state. They can't come back. They're not coming back to that safe and social to be able to learn. So much of this is about that co-regulation experience of the adults in their world as well. Non-directiveness removes the threat of demand or failure. This is why we do what we do. We're not going to impose that agenda or that structure or that need to have a particular activity in mind that they need to complete, which is the challenge, obviously, conversely to what I was just saying in the education space. It's an incredibly difficult and challenging task for our current population of kids who have come out of that COVID generation. So it is really challenging for kids in that space if they're feeling that sense of demand or potential failure. But in the playroom, that's something very different that we can offer. Empathetic tracking shows the child their experience is seen. We know so much about the support that we offer to parents in the beginning days of play therapy, in just starting with the basics, is reflecting feelings, because that helps in that co-regulation space as well for kids. If they feel like their parent gets it in terms of how they are feeling in that moment, it can help to de-escalate the child. But so much about what we do in the playroom is helping to build that sense of safety through that empathetic tracking as well. So it helps them to feel safe and feel that sense of trust. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about what we see in the playroom when children are in those different states that I've been talking about tonight. So you can get curious about that if you're noticing it, because so much about that then tells you what the child is needing or what they're trying to communicate to us about their world. And again, guys, that thinking brain, that logical brain is completely offline if they are in state 2 or state 3. So it's very important that we are focusing on that co-regulation to help support them to be able to come back to that state 1. So state 1 being that safe and social state that we're looking for. I mentioned earlier, we've got a presentation of a child who is engaging freely. They're making eye contact. They're asking questions maybe. Questions is one of those things, though, that can potentially be an indicator of increasing anxiety. So keeping that in mind. But if they're interacting with us, it is in that reciprocal nature, that mutual connection. They're able to tolerate limit setting. They're able to show creativity and imagination. We know that they're in that therapeutic window. And you know those children that come in ready to do their session and connect with us. I've even had scenarios of children where I know that they are potentially, because so many kids that we work with, right, go through that stage, and especially the second and the third stage, the aggressive and the regressive in child-centered play therapy. And we know that very often in that second stage, they can seem very stuck. They can seem very repetitive in their play. They can seem very entrenched in some of these really difficult and big emotions. And even just recently, I had a client who has absolutely been in the trenches of some really big work in that second stage, and came in for a particular session a lot more regulated. And that really threw me, because I was really prepared and ready to have lots of that space for offering safety, both in my verbal tracking, but much more in my nonverbal communication of my facial expressions, my body posture, just my gentle reflecting, my empathy that I wanted to communicate, and that authenticity to help this child to regulate enough so that they can start to do their work. That's so much about the goal of the work that we do. And he came in, or this client came in, much more regulated, and it just really threw me, because I was like, oh wait, we actually might be in this first date, which is great, because we can get some really incredible work tackled when we get that opportunity to do that. And when I say that, it's the child's agenda, right? I'm not setting that agenda of what we're going to do. And that's the best part about child-centered play therapy, because they keep us on our toes about what that journey of progress and progression in their therapeutic work looks like. So it can sometimes feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But that's the best part about it. That's what I love about it. So we can have children in that first date, absolutely. Probably more consistently, though, to kind of bring the bad news. But to many of you, I know you would know this already, we generally have more kids in that state 2 or state 3, in that fight or flight or that shutdown freeze. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like in the playroom. If they're in that fight or flight, it kind of goes without saying, you're going to have probably a child that's dysregulated before they even come into the playroom. So they're dysregulated. And so what does that look like? They're testing limits. They're highly aggressive. I lean into my psychodynamic lens here too a little bit, so I'm kind of crossing over theories here. So I apologize if I've confused anyone. It's now 9:20 at night, so this is why I'm going in so many different directions. But with psychodynamic psychotherapy, we talk a lot about transference and countertransference, and so I would describe it from that lens as often feeling like it's almost like you're walking on eggshells, or you feel like it's quite tense in terms of that unconscious kind of connection in the space, where you feel like you've got to be on alert, you've got to kind of have those limits ready to go. That's our fight or flight, guys. So it's lots of limit testing. It's a nervous system kind of checking in to say, is this space actually safe? And leaning into, because I'm going to cross over with my theories now just for funsies. So if we think about it from an attachment theory perspective as well, we're also talking about a child who in their formative years, in their unconscious downloading of their program and their understanding of relationships with others, if they've had maladaptive examples where there has been that dysregulation, we're going to find the child playing that out in the playroom with us, because that's how they understand relationships work. So not only are we unpacking and rewiring those attachment examples and understandings, we're also helping in that nervous system co-regulation space. So there is so much, and then we're also reflecting feelings, so we're helping to support that kind of emotional awareness as well. So much is happening in the playroom at once. It's incredible. So what I want to emphasize here is, I often find, especially in the beginning for beginning play therapists, that aggressive stage, the second stage of play, where we see so much of that fight or flight, can really test beginning play therapists, or even seasoned play therapists sometimes. So it's really important, again, to be able to use some of these theories. This really helps me in my practice to know this isn't something personal. This is nothing to do with any, I guess, kind of limits I've set, or, understanding of how the room works or how the toys work. It's not about that. It's about them coming in to tell us about how they are doing and how they are feeling, and them being in this fight or flight state tells us that they're needing support with that emotional regulation at this point, first and foremost. So our job as play therapists is to stay regulated. That's the key, you guys. When we're observing and connecting and helping to support a child who is dysregulated and in that fight or flight, it's so important that we stay regulated. So being able to ground yourself, I think I've talked about this before in my podcast. I have a fluffy rug in my room. Oh no, I don't anymore. Oh my gosh, I've had a fluffy rug for so many years, and I now have a mellow mat, but it's like one from Kmart. It's amazing, you guys. I absolutely love it. But I do find that I connect and ground myself with whatever rug I've got in the room, but at the moment, the mellow mat, because that really does help me to really bring myself back to that presence of the space, to really notice how I'm feeling and help bringing myself into that safe window so I can then be present for the child. How do I also do that? So I'm going off on a tangent, you guys, but I promise I'm going to get back to this research and this theory. How am I doing that in the playroom, and why am I doing that? Because it's so much about being present with the child and helping to put limits in and making sure that I'm not replicating relationships outside of play therapy that might be maladaptive. So I think that this can be a fine line that we can walk as play therapists between wanting to give that permissiveness to the child for them to be able to tell their story in their way, in their time. But then there's also a need, and I see it as a responsibility, an ethical responsibility for us as play therapists to make sure that the child is not pushing so far into that second state of that fight or flight that we can't bring them back. So there is that moment for me. I usually have a sort of a bandwidth here, you guys. It's too late at night to measure that exactly, but you get my drift. I have a capacity with that before I notice that I need to start putting in limits, because it starts to impact my congruence. What is congruence? Also our state of optimum arousal, our safe, kind of window of connection with the child, right? Our own nervous system state. So it's so important when we notice that we start to get activated, which is also impacting our congruence and our authenticity from a child-centered play therapy perspective, is when we need to put limits in. So if you notice that, if you are having an experience at the moment in your playrooms where you've got a child that becomes very dysregulated, who needs to, express a lot of big feelings, but also say chaos and distraction and playing that out in the playroom, there is certainly a clinical rationale when we're looking at this theory to say putting some of those limits in to help to support that child's nervous system to come back into that safe window is actually really vital and important at this point. So I plant that seed because, again, I'm Rogerian to my core. I don't like telling anyone what to do when it comes to play therapy. But I want to, offer that suggestion that it's so much about you staying regulated as much as it is the child. And so as soon as you lose that or feel like that's being impacted, we need to kind of bring ourselves back as well. So what does that look like? Putting therapeutic limits in, because that is those boundaries and that safety that the child is craving through that fight or flight response. They're feeling like they can't find that safety and they're becoming that dysregulated fight or flight self. So to give you guys, that rationale for early limits, you guys, or talking about the third state where we've got that freeze or shut down. So that's a child. These are the ones that worry me more, you guys. Like if you have a child like this in the playroom, it's so important that we keep on top of it. We're observing it, we're noticing it, we're connecting with the child, and we're helping to support them. So sitting passively, minimal engagement in the playroom. They might seem like they say very little or move very little. They might seem like they take a lot of sessions before there's any movement. So their nervous system is very slowly trying to assess, that sense of safety in the room. And so it seems very gradual and kind of prolonged, in terms of their progression in the stages of play. There's so many more ways than that. I'm just kind of giving you guys a really brief overview. But the idea is, again, recognizing we believe as child-centered play therapists to our core in the process. Trust the process, trust the child, and trust us. So regardless of this theory, we know that children will take their time in their way, in their agenda to move to their therapeutic goals. What this theory is saying is it's so important that we don't try and push engagement. because if we're trying to do that, it's so much about being present to kind of remove that demand and wait, because they will come. And I always say that, well, I usually say that when I'm connecting with supervisees around this idea of making meaning in child-centered play therapy, and that idea of that children will wait for us to get it, to truly get it, I guess, around what they're trying to communicate is their kind of core issue, the core challenge. This is the same thing. We just need to give them time. They'll get there. They'll get there. They just need time. Every child comes with their own experiences, their own background, I guess their own triggers that have brought them to this state of either feeling like they need to be in fight or flight to keep themselves safe, or the other, they need to withdraw and disassociate. Either way, what is important to reflect on as a play therapist, and what I want to plant the seed for you guys, I've got like a couple more of these to talk about in a second, but to kind of bookend this, what is your nervous system doing in the playroom as a play therapist? I'm putting that out there for you guys to begin that reflection for yourselves individually about how you show up. And let's be really real, you guys, and authentic here, because I can't do it any other way. There is going to be days where we're not truly present. And that's okay. We need to give ourselves that grace, but we also need to be putting some of those systems in place to take care of ourselves as well. And look, I am definitely not a leader in this space when it comes to self-care and putting things in place. I'm a work in progress, you guys. And if you feel like you're that too, we got this. We've got this. We're a work in progress. We're on that pre-contemplation part of the change theory cycle. I don't know. But it's very important, all jokes aside, I take obviously great pride in the therapeutic work I do in the playroom. So I do make sure I only have, now it's 1 day a week of client work. So I have that luxury of being able to dedicate that day to say, I'm going to work to truly be present with my clients, because I know that's what they need from an emotional regulation point of view. So starting to put in small breaks in your day, helping you to have that time off if you need, helping you to kind of have those self-care and connection rituals outside, on weekends and nights and weekends, whatever. So much of that is important, right, for us to be able to stay regulated ourselves in the playroom. But what we know from this theory is when a child is in that fight or flight state, your system will want to match it too. We call that mirroring neurons. We know that from the neuroscience of the brain. So our brains, primitively are wired to match aggression with aggression. That's just how it is. And so you may feel anxious, irritated, frustrated, elevated. And so it's our ability to stay in state one, to stay in that safe window of regulation during a dysregulated session with a child. That is genuine clinical skill. That is not an easy thing to do. And it requires your own regulation practice outside of the room. So being able to decompress afterwards, being able to get some fresh air, take a break, grab a drink. So many, I'm not going to kind of list a whole bunch of different ways to do that. What works for you is going to work well for you, but making sure that you're doing that to be able to be the best version of yourself in the playroom. We know that anyway. Virginia Axeline in the 40s talked so much about us having that genuineness and true interest in working with kids to be able to do this work. So we really develop that clinical skill over so much experience, so much time, so much learning, and it's an ongoing process. We're a work in progress, you guys, as play therapists. So truly being aware of it and working on it and committing to ongoing working on it is important too for us to be able to do our job. So I want to talk to parents for a second, because I know that we often have parents that are listening to our podcast as well. And this might be a podcast that you might want to share with a parent if you're working as a play therapist too, just to explain a little bit about what happens in that nervous system response to that threat of safety, and why we see talking to children, or even talking to children after a meltdown or a tantrum, is just a complete waste of time, really, because they don't have that cognitive, logical brain online. During the event, they've probably started to kind of bring it back online afterwards, but because it was offline during the tantrum, they can't tell you anything about what happened. They can't. And if they do, they're probably making it up. I'm just kidding. They potentially are, to be all fairness, because they want to obviously navigate the situation and be able to find a resolution with you as a parent. So it's very important that we're not having those very verbal, logical conversations with a child in the moment when they're dysregulated, or really afterwards, to be fair. So what are we doing as parents? We're noticing the state of our child. We're noticing this. You guys know from listening to the podcast, I have she will be 14 tomorrow. Oh, good Lord. And I have a 12 turning 13-year-old. So I'm in the trenches of the parenting of the teenage years. And I'm still not okay, you guys. I'll keep reporting back to let you know. But nevertheless, we are noticing in children of all ages, whether they're littlies, whether they're babies, toddlers, 2-year-olds, up to the teen years, you guys, this all is relevant. Notice the state before responding. I talk about with teenagers, like noticing the temperature in the room, like truly, because you can with teenagers. The sass is real, the temperature is real, and so it works for all ages, you guys. Is your child in fight or flight or freeze? If they are becoming dysregulated and if they're really activated right now, tell yourself that my child, their nervous system is activated, to give yourself that pause to then decide how you're going to respond. Because what we're doing in that moment is trying to use essentially that higher order reasoning as us as adults to be able to respond effectively. And we can't do that if we're matching that emotion and in that emotional limbic system state. So regulate yourself first. Look after yourself because you need to, because parenting is a marathon, not a sprint, you guys. You can't co-regulate a dysregulated child from your own dysregulated state. Let me say that again. You cannot co-regulate a dysregulated child from your own dysregulated state. You're welcome. So this is your permission as a parent to take a beat before you respond, to take a minute to kind of calm yourself, to bring yourself back down into that safe and social space before you then tackle, obviously supporting your child. Take a breath, slow your voice, lower your body. You are the nervous system intervention at this point. It's so much about what you are doing non-verbally as opposed to anything you can say verbally to a child. It is so much in that non-verbal experience. So connection, people say this all the time, right? Connection before correction. So get alongside your child before you address the behavior. A hand on the shoulder or getting down on their level. I don't really like the hand on the shoulder, let's be honest, actually. I'm scrapping that. Coming down and connecting with them within their space, helping to support them when they are dysregulated. Obviously, following your safety and theirs, so we don't want to put you in a position where you might have your child lash out at you or anything like that. But coming into their space in a way that's safe and respectful and connected, getting down on their level, and reflecting and validating their feelings. I can see you're really struggling right now. You're having a really tough time right now. Before doing anything else, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to help to bring them back down. We're helping, and see, even in the way that I just spoke that, I started to go slower, my tone changed. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, and even like as I'm saying this in real time, I didn't practice this, you guys, so this is so funny that I'm doing this. But by me doing that, by me slowing down, one of my clinical supervisors calls it the slow-mo effect, I think she calls it, where you literally go into slow-mo, which is not supposed to be like patronizing. I actually really love it. It's this idea for especially us neurodivergent folk who want, our brain is going at 50 million miles an hour, to actually be reminded to slow down. Slow-mo mode, let's call it that, slow-mo mode, means that, see, I even just took a breath then. It means then you as the adult, as the parent, have to stop too, right? And so when we can slow down, then we can help the child. So why does play therapy work? The playroom is specifically designed to bring your child's nervous system into state one. into that safe and social space so they can learn and play. In that state, which is why we're trying to do it, they can focus, they can process, they can integrate, and they can heal experiences that have been too overwhelming for them with any other approach in any other way. So it's not just playing, you guys. There is so much, like every time I find like this new theory or this new neuroscience, I'm just so excited because we know that this is what happens in the playroom, but to put some of that science behind it is just so powerful as well, to give, that credibility and that evidence base behind what we do in the playroom as child-centered play therapists. So it's not just playing, you guys. It's the most neurologically sophisticated therapeutic environment we have for children. Ooh, say that 5 times fast, you guys. So I want to summarize here what we've talked about because it's now 45 minutes I've been talking, you guys. I need to do all of the things. I'm not even organized. I hope that this has been useful and helpful, truly. And I want to summarize here what we've talked about because we've talked about the nervous system, obviously, and we've talked about this idea that regulation always, always, always comes before anything else. Before we do or say anything else, regulation comes first. Co-regulation is biological. Our nervous system is a social organ that needs another to help co-regulate, right? Your regulated presence is the most powerful tool you have as a child-centered play therapist. And CCPT is built around the nervous system. Isn't that incredible? It's why it works every single time because it's not just philosophical, it's neurobiological. How cool is that? So for all of you listening, for our play therapists out there, I put this question to you. This week in your sessions, notice which state each of your child that you connect with in the playroom arrives with. Do you notice them in that safe and social space? Are they in that fight or flight? Or are they in that freeze shutdown? And notice what you do that helps to shift them and move them into state 1. So what do you help to do in that space that makes you so vital and important as a child-centered play therapist? And to our parents this week, when your child's behavior is hard, ask yourself, which state are they in? And what does my nervous system need to do first? There you go, you guys. Amazing. So, hey, thank you for listening tonight. What a trip, what a ride. We got there, you guys. We did it. We did all of the things. Hey, I hope this was helpful and useful. That's always my intention in connecting with each of you. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I don't have a plan for next week's episode. Oh, no, wait. So we will be offline next week. So it will be a flashback episode for next week. So enjoy a flashback Friday episode, and then we will be back the week after, back to our usual programming. We would love to hear your feedback. If this is an episode that has resonated for you, please check out our socials. We post every week, letting you guys know about when the episode drops. So we'd love your feedback if you're finding it useful and helpful, or if there's other episodes that you'd like to hear from us as well. That would be amazing. We love our circle community. We are so much about bringing our child-centered play therapist community together and celebrating child-centered play therapy and supporting each other. So for all of you interested, please check out also our Circle subscription. We have a free community subscription that you are so welcome to join to connect with other child-centered play therapists from around the world. We would love to see you there as well. So please check out the links in our episode description for more details. But I would like to wish all of you an incredibly safe and healthy and happy Easter break. Here in Australia, we have a long weekend, so I can't wait to have some much needed recharge time and connection with family. So please look after yourselves and each other over this weekend. Stay safe if you are traveling, and please continue to follow us on the socials, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you have found us, and share our podcast with anyone that you think might find this episode or series helpful for them. I'm so grateful to each of you and for your support. So grateful. So thank you so much for listening. I will catch you guys in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now. Bye. Thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Play Therapy Circle. If anything resonated with you today, I'd love it if you could follow the podcast, share it with a colleague, or leave a short review. It really helps others find our circle. And if you have a topic or question you'd love me to explore, I'd love to hear from you. This space is for you, and I want it to feel like a conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, you belong here.